Welcome back, everyone. My name is Claire Barrett. Delighted to be back with you and emceeing this final track for the day, final track for the Apidays Helsinki event. And we're going to kick off. We're continuing conversations around large-scale digital enablement, the physical digital world. And we are delighted to have API specialist from Cisco Solutions Finland speaking next. And with the heritage and reach of an organization such as Cisco, Jonne Tuomela could not be better placed to share his insights on technology as the fourth utility for smart buildings. Welcome, Jonne.
Thank you very much. And I need to apologize, first of all. I was having some technical difficulties and that caused a little bit of a jumble in the schedule, but we are back on track now.
We're delighted to have you here anyway. If you just want to, we'll just wait for your screen slides to come up. There they are. Looks like it's all running smoothly. The floor is yours, Jonne.
Okay. Thank you very much. So the topic of today is going to be the foundations of a smart building using technology as sort of the fourth utility. But before we get to the topic, I wanted to give a brief introduction of myself. So this is me on the left, and as you can probably tell by the hair and the overall kind of scruffiness, that I am still working from home. But the return to office phase is starting soon, and a lot of companies have already started that, which is why smart buildings is such an important topic for today, or such an important topic these days. But anyways, like Claire mentioned, my name is Jonne Tuomela, and I'm a technical solutions specialist at Cisco. And this is essentially a fancy way of saying that I am a technical salesperson or a sales engineer, a system engineer. We go by many different titles. But I'm also a programmability advocate at Cisco. And that means that I get to go to customers and I get to tell them about all the cool stuff that we're doing with networking and programming combined. And if I have one confession to make, I actually quite like APIs. I think they're a lot of fun. And just by nature of my job, I have the privilege of having access to a lot of different technologies. Some of that technology is currently installed in my apartment, so I get to play around with incorporating my networking gear. I get to incorporate my sensors with a lot of the consumer smart home electronics that I have, such as the Philips Hue lights. I have Google Home installed as well. And I have sensors placed in different places around my apartment that if they pick up an anomaly, such as a water leak, then they will send a message to my WebEx chat or my Slack chat. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of doing these sort of silly smart home things, which is probably why I'm currently here and speaking about smart buildings. I have my LinkedIn on the bottom as well and a QR code. So if you want to scan it and connect, then feel free. I'll be happy to connect. But I wanted to take a look first at some of the recent trends or drivers that are pushing the importance of smart buildings, as well as a recent paradigm shift that's been happening in the industry. The first trend, and probably, at least in my opinion, the most important one, is the environmental aspect. According to some studies, buildings contribute a significant amount of greenhouse gases as well as energy consumption in major cities. So 30% of greenhouse gas emissions coming from buildings, as well as 70% of energy consumption in major cities is from buildings. And now recently, there's been a big trend in a lot of industries and a lot of companies about being environmental, about being green. And talking about my own personal experience, or Cisco has committed to being net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. So in about under 20 years. But I know similar or other companies have similar goals about being either 2025 or 2030. And if they don't have such goals, then I think we should, or personally, I think we should challenge these companies to come up with some goals to reduce the amount of energy, reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. It is imperative to get these numbers down. The second trend that I wanted to look at is the human aspect. So in that yellow bubble, I think everyone is fairly tired about hearing about the new normal or how COVID has affected working styles or working locations. But it is a very real thing. It's a very real thing that is happening today. 60% of workstations are unoccupied each day. But then on the other hand, a lot of employees, in my experience also, we're working from meeting rooms. So in the meeting rooms that we used to hold customer meetings, and now there are personal workstations because we can guarantee some amount of isolation, some amount of social distancing when we are in these meeting rooms. And sometimes this can lead to a proper search in order to find a meeting room that isn't used. Then we have the expense side of things, where real estate cost is the third largest expense for a company. Despite that previous statistic of 60% of workstations are unoccupied. So you're paying for a lot of wasted space, and there's a lot of these inefficiencies that we can identify and cut down on in order to cut down our expenses. And then these last two bubbles, maybe not strictly speaking trends, but they are there to highlight the importance of doing things right. So 75 billion connected devices by 2025 is a staggering amount. And that means the IoT market is really increasing, it's surging, and industries are adopting and incorporating technology. But because we have such a large number of devices, that also leads to a very large threat vector. So security is a key thing to keep in mind. And then the last thing is, and the last point is that with a well-designed building management system, or BMS, I might be referring to BMS later on in this presentation. With a well-designed BMS, there are some serious savings to be made. Personally, despite me being a salesperson, I think the money side of things is a little bit boring. But it is also something that is measurable. You have like concrete value out of it, and then that means that it is valuable to higher ups, or the higher ups who are making these decisions. But in my opinion, that environmental aspect is one of the most important factors when it comes to smart buildings. And then looking at the paradigm shift that is happening currently in buildings, if you think about some of the nice buildings in your cities, so Helsinki is my city, so I'm thinking about some of the nice old buildings that are there. They have thick stone walls, high ceilings, rock solid construction. And while these are desirable traits, I really want high ceilings. That means that these are very stiff buildings. They're unchangeable. Meanwhile, modern buildings, new buildings, and specifically modern office buildings, they're no longer these purpose-built physical structures. In a way, they are becoming like programmable applications. They're aware of the purpose they solve or serve, and they're able to adapt on the fly to improve that service, that purpose. Thinking back to my own office building as well, it's not a big effort to convert a space. I know at least we've converted some of our workspaces into new meeting rooms as well. And this is a very quick operation because this is what new modern office buildings are designed to do. They're designed to adapt. We want this flexibility and adaptability in the technology that is in the buildings as well. And we want our buildings to act as this like programmable entities. The foundation of programmability is to digitally connect things so that then you can rewire them, you can repurpose using code later on. And as you can probably guess by the name of the conference that you're participating in, that code comes in the form of APIs. It really should be a simple process to expand, to change, to onboard or integrate thousands of these devices that make up a smart building in order to better serve the users, or in this case, the occupants of that building. Smart buildings are really considered smart because they're able to collect data, they're able to analyze data, and they're able to use that data to create a better and more efficient experience. So then we get to the actual meaty part of the presentation, We've defined smart buildings, but then what is the fourth utility? That second part of the title. And like all things, it can have many different definitions, but the one that I like is that the fourth utility is pervasive connectivity throughout the whole building. Essentially, the fourth utility is the network, and we're using power over Ethernet to connect all these different building systems. With power over Ethernet, we're using networking to connect these water meters, lighting, HVAC, security cameras, these things that our building managers are very familiar with. But now they're being connected in sort of a shared and scalable way. Security is not quite in the scope of this presentation now, but again, I just wanted to highlight that it is a hugely important part of smart buildings. When you are connecting so many different devices from different vendors, then the threat landscape becomes very wide, and we need some rock solid security. We need rock solid segmentation in there. But going back to the topic at hand, if we look at the current state of our buildings, they're very siloed. We have very siloed building technology with multiple separate networks for our building functions. BMS systems have their own networks and cabling, so does physical security, so our locks and our cameras. Elevators have their own networks, and this is very inefficient in terms of cabling because you are running multiple parallel cables up and across the building, but it is also inefficient and difficult in terms of integration because these are in their own silos. So the idea is to flatten out and converge these networks into an edge-to-edge IP network, one that can be segmented and secured and defined, and then modified with software as well. We want the smart buildings to act as these programmable platforms that we can develop upon and easily integrate our systems on. So if we look at the image on the right, we have our classically separate networks now integrated and connected to each other. And then we can begin the process of connecting them via APIs because these networks are now connected to the same backbone. They're part of that same network and they're able to share their information. It is not, however, just a matter of all being connected to the network. Of course, these building systems, they need to support the APIs. Based on my own experience as well, and seeing how the trend is going, there's a rise of smart buildings and deep connectivity. I do think that a lot of these newer building technologies are starting to incorporate APIs because smart buildings are a very real thing. It may not be default yet, but it is something to keep in mind. I've included this slide just so you can get a better idea of some of the things that you can actually connect to the network power via power over Ethernet through the network. Things that you don't normally maybe think about being smart devices or connected devices. You have ceiling fans there. You can have status signs or horns and sirens, PoE displays, biometric door locks. There's a lot of these technologies. There's a lot of products that can be connected and powered by the network as well. And then all these products can either provide data or then they can act on data that is provided to them from different systems. So lighting or maybe ceiling fans and HVAC systems, while being separate solutions, separate deployments, we can combine them via APIs. I have one example here about an environmental monitoring use case. And the slide may look a little bit maybe messy or hard to read, but it is actually pretty simple top to bottom. And in this case, there appears to be some sort of issue with the HVAC system. So the BMS system, the building management system, it notifies the building manager that 2 of the air conditioning dampers are inoperable. Air is not circulating properly in our meeting rooms. And at this point, maybe the occupant is starting to feel a little bit bad, a little bit drowsy. Because we have telepresence devices in our meeting rooms that have these inbuilt air quality sensors, then these sensors can notify our automation engine that air quality is low. Volatile organic compounds levels can be high, or maybe the CO2 levels are high. And this automation engine then sends a message to our building manager saying that things are not looking good in this meeting room. The building manager can then set the conference room availability in the automation engine to unavailable, which then, because it is connected to our meeting rooms, it's connected to our telepresence devices in the meeting rooms. It can change the status there as well. And then those telepresence devices, those screens, can tell the tenant to leave the room now and lock down the meeting room until the problem is fixed. Once problem is fixed, then the BMS system, it'll inform the building manager that everything's good. Building manager can then go change the availability of that meeting room. And you can take even one step further into the automation side as well by having maybe the BMS communicate directly with those WebEx or those telepresence units, connect them via APIs as well. So then we can eliminate that building manager being that middleman who shuts down the meeting rooms. So in the earlier example, we had sort of a smart building deployment, which was quite point to point, or is a mesh-like deployment where you are manually connecting all the systems to each other. But then we can also do that in a centralized manner. And it can be especially useful if dealing with multiple vendors. So we work with a lot of partners that are specialized in specific types of smart building technology. And a hospital is a good example. You may have, for instance, Contact.io is one of our partners providing asset management through the use of Bluetooth tags. Maybe we have Stanley Healthcare for use in patient tracking and Maze Map for wayfinding inside that hospital. These could be 3 different systems, 3 different deployments inside the hospital. But instead, if we connect them all using that 4th utility, we connect them all using the network and a centralized sort of collector of that API data, then that limits the amount of links that we need to make between our applications. And then we can also create dashboards, different dashboards for our stakeholders or building managers, depending on their roles and responsibilities. This is a little bit of a maybe like a personal tangent, but I've been to some customer locations where they have done them in the way that you have 3 completely separate smart building technologies. And then that means that they have an access point on the ceiling, and then they have maybe a Bluetooth receiver for the Bluetooth tags. Maybe they have a 3rd system in place as well. And that just means that they have multiple times the amount of physical devices on that ceiling, receiving and transmitting information. And it ends up looking a little bit maybe funny, or it's inefficient, because then you also have different systems to manage. So that's the advantage that a sort of centralized collector brings. Some other quick use cases that I thought of is that, for instance, we have these smart room booking systems in place so that we know when someone will be in these meeting rooms. So then we can adjust our air conditioning based on that. Maybe turn it on 20 minutes before someone will be in the room. Or then we can, for instance, if the meeting room is not booked the entire day, then we don't need to be air conditioning it. We don't need to be causing these or wasting energy and causing emissions, air conditioning a room that will remain empty for most of the day. This is at least one easy way where we can start optimizing, driving down that energy consumption. And people counting is quite similar as well. We can, 1 person requires less air conditioning than 6 people in a meeting room. We can people count using these telepresence or using sensors, and then feed this information to our HVAC system to better optimize our energy usage. And because we practice what we preach at Cisco, I wanted to use this as sort of a case study as well of what we have done. So currently we are measuring workspace density, or the density of people inside our workspaces, because we are sort of slowly increasing the amount that we are returning to the office. So we can receive alerts if the density is too high or if the device count is too high in a certain area. We're getting analytics, both real time and historical as well. We're correlating this via our other systems, such as when we tag in, we slap our badges on the sensors to unlock the doors. So we're getting that data correlating with our other sensors as well. And in the future, we hope to be mapping where is our unoccupied conference rooms based on the usage, maybe tracking things in our supply chain as well via Bluetooth tags, so we can optimize that, thus again driving down emissions, trying to hit that emission target goal, or that net zero greenhouse gases by 2040. And then lastly, we had that tracking janitorial services for enhanced cleaning, so that if no one has used that meeting room for the whole day, then we do not have to clean that. There's a lot, or smart buildings that are becoming this like very real thing. But like most big changes, it happens gradually. And that's why I think it's so important to build that foundation first, build that fourth utility, because when the time comes, and it will come, then we can be ready to start incorporating these smart technologies, increasing the safety and security of our occupants, automating our systems, our building management systems, and bringing this sort of smarter and better outcome for our occupants. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonne, for sharing that presentation. It's really, really interesting and insightful. You mentioned towards the end there about you're doing what I heard yesterday, a term dog fooding. You're applying the technologies that you're offering for your customers into your own buildings. As an employee using those buildings yourself, I'm curious, has the kind of measurement that you've got around your occupancy, around what people are using meeting rooms for, is it changing people's behavior? Or is it still too early after 2 years of very disrupted use of offices, too early to kind of
I think it's still fairly early to tell how it is going. There's a lot of cool things that we are currently doing in terms of that smart office or tracking our occupants. And at the moment, we are trying to just keep it at that safe level, while as much as I hate to say it, the pandemic is still a little bit ongoing, and we are trying to be as careful. So it is quite early to tell.
Has it made a difference for you personally? Think, as an employee in these buildings, thinking about some of the bigger goals that you talked to early on about the green.
Yes, I think it's one of the key things with smart buildings is that they provide not only that safety, that optimization, but it provides a good experience to our users. So you can't be sacrificing the occupants' experience, their well-being, in order to optimize as much as possible. So in that way, if our users are not necessarily even noticing a change, that might be a good thing already. If there are things happening in the background, if you are optimizing your systems while our employees aren't noticing anything, that means you are optimizing well. Personally, I think it's a comforting thought in that way, that it is being taken into account. My safety is at the forefront, and that's why we are incorporating these technologies. It's means that the company sort of really cares about that kind of stuff. They are in it for the well-being as well.
Really important, and thank you for bringing so many of these ESG, social, human factors into your talk. Unfortunately, we're at time, so I'm going to have to thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today, and all the very best of luck with your next projects.
Thanks, Claire.